Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 1111 Downtown in Fort Worth. I'm Tom McDermott, the pastor of 1111 Community and one of the associate ministers at First United Methodist Church. I'm so glad you're joining in this morning, and I hope you're doing well. Take a minute to register your attendance. There, you'll see that inside. Also, if you're visiting with us for the first time, I want to send you one of these things, one of our 1111 tumblers. Sip, breathe, smile. These are really solid, beautiful things, and we'd love to send you one, so give us the information there, the address where we can send it. And if you're visiting, if you're on Facebook, and make a comment there, but maybe private message me and give me that information, and I'll be sure to get that out to you. As well as we'll get to you one of these face masks. We're still going to be wearing these a little bit while longer, even with the vaccine coming out, but we'll still be wearing these for a while. So let us send you one of our 1111 face masks. So we're in the second Sunday of Advent, and I'm going to be speaking about courage. Linda McDermott, Reverend Linda's not joining me this time around. She had some things came up, and we just weren't able to make this happen this week. So I'm doing this from my office, which has a number of very interesting things to keep you busy should you find my words driving you into kind of a lull. But while we're sitting here and thinking about things in my office, I wanted to point this out. This is one of my favorite little objects here, a sculpture, a little clay piece from an artist up in northern Michigan. I used to put this on the altar table in CTL back when we met. You remember when we met back then? Of course, it says Jesus, but it's got a little slit here for pennies. It's a penny bank or a quarter bank or a silver dollar bank. We would just collect coins, and that would go towards the food bank here at the church. Meanwhile, of course, Jesus saves. Get it? Jesus saves. Anyway. So I want to invite you to take an opportunity there. You'll see a chance to give as well online. We appreciate your support and your financial support from week to week as we continue to do this online. But also, if you haven't done your pledge card, I invite you to do that as we plan out our year next year and what that might look like. Thanks so much for that support. Finally, you'll see that painting behind me. The message I'm doing this week, it overlaps a lot with last week's word, confidence and courage. There's a lot of interrelatedness and a lot of overlap. But as you're listening to that, it occurred to me that this painting speaks to this as well. My son Tim, when he went to Japan and then worked a little bit in Japan and visited in China, he picked up this painting by an artist named Yui Minjun, and I'm sure I'm saying the name wrong. But he's an interesting youngish painter who gave up his job as a civil engineer to start painting as a way of sort of healing. He was experiencing a lot of discouragement and despair with the way that things were in China, but also in the world at large. And so he began to sort of satirically portray himself just laughing at things that he found funny and interesting and curious. And it was a path towards his own strength and courage and healing. It made me think of this poem, Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. Some of you know this poem. I hadn't planned on doing it, but I looked at that painting this morning and I thought, oh yeah, wild geese. Listen to the words, see if they don't resonate with you, hang on to some of the phrases that do, and see if that doesn't also connect you more deeply with what we're talking about a little bit later. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert. Repenting, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. It calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Good to be with you. We'll see you in just a moment.
The welcome candle is lit. Please join me as we share these familiar words of welcome with one another. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again.
Hi everybody, good morning. I hope you're doing all right today. Here's our prayer. Holy One, we're thankful that we can come together again like this. We're thankful for technology. We're thankful for the people who make it all happen. We're thankful because it's helping us to sustain our sense of community. It's a little bit harder these days, but may we all take a breath and remember each other and remember the love that has passed between us for so many years. And we welcome those who are listening today who may be new to us. May you also feel a sense of community with us. And Holy One, today in this season of Advent, as we think about the path of peace, and as we hear from Tom about finding courage to take that path, may we open ourselves to understanding our own biases, our ways of being that certainly impede our own sense of peace, not to mention our peace with others. May we be courageous and look at all of that, remembering and learning that our own fears, our pains, our faltering self-esteem are things that others hold in common. And so may we be compassionate toward ourselves and toward each other and open the path of peace. Amen.
Love came down at Christmas. Love, love, love divine. Love was born at Christmas. Stars and angels gave the sign. Love came down at Christmas. Love, love, love divine. Love was born at Christmas. Stars and angels gave the sign. Love shall be our token. Love be yours and love be mine. Love from God to all of us. Love for plea and gift of sign. Love shall be our token. Love be yours and love be mine. Love from God to all of us. Love for plea and gift of sign. Love came down at Christmas. Love, love, love divine. Love was born at Christmas. Stars and angels gave the sign. Stars and angels gave the sign.
Again, hello everyone, and good to have you with us this morning. It's good to be with you. I hope you're doing well, and so glad you've tuned in this morning. I wanted to give a word of thanks to Sharm Robarts and Brad Thompson and the band for their part in this morning. The band did a great job with that song, Love Came Down at Christmas. I love that song this time of year. Speaks to our message today as well. And Sharm's prayer, so nice and so much, such beautiful words. Also thanks to Tanya Pierce and Eric Short for their part in the welcome candle. Always appreciate their involvement. I appreciate everyone playing a part in this. There's so much to be grateful for. Graham Skipper, who is our editor and makes all these pieces come seamlessly together in spite of what I throw at him and what the rest of us upload. He's down in Austin. Thanks, Graham, for all your part. And thank you all for watching and being a part of this. I never know. We just assume you're out there. So I'm speaking to you directly, virtually, through the spirit of technology. Thanks for joining in with us. I'm also coming to you from my office. Since Linda couldn't join in this week, I decided I'd just record this from my office. It's a little bit distracting. I realize that, but hopefully the color is appealing. And if you get bored with what I'm saying, you can always just look at some of the other objects and see what's there. Also, there may be distractions. There may be some things happening outside because we are downtown, and there may be some stuff happening in the hallway because it is an office area. But let's just plow through it, and hopefully that won't distract us too much. I'm going to read from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 11. We're in this series, this Advent series that the whole church is doing, which we're calling Still Christmas. In spite of what's going on, it's still Christmas. And Advent is this time that we prepare for the coming of the Christ child. It's a part of our tradition as a Methodist church, the Protestant church, these 4 weeks before Christmas. So these texts from Isaiah are typically read during this time of year. I'll get into that in just a minute. But here, listen to this one from Isaiah chapter 40. I'm reading from the Message. And by the way, it's written kind of like a play, so there's almost scene work going on here. There's actually kind of cue phrases that are read, and I'll read those too. Comfort, oh comfort my people, says your God. Speak softly, be gentle with Jerusalem, but make it very clear she has done her time, served her sentence for all of her misdeeds. She's been punished more than enough. Cue the thunder in the desert. Prepare the path for God's arrival. Make the road clear and smooth. Clear out all the obstacles and rocks. Fill in the holes and ruts. Then a voice says, shout. But I say, why should I shout? These people are nothing but grass. They're fickle. Their love is as fragile as a dandelion caught in a breeze. First voice again. Climb a mountain, Zion. You're not a preacher of doom and despair. You're the preacher of good news. Don't be timid. Don't hold back. See the path. Seize the path. The Holy One comes carrying all creation like a shepherd cradling his sheep. So you can see why this text is important this time of year for the Jewish people. It hails the coming, it prophesies the coming of the final king who will then rule, the Messiah who would then establish the final kingdom of God and rule over the people of Israel and the world. And for the Jewish followers of Jesus, of course, they saw him as that, and it was in the time of Roman Empire and Roman rule for generations and over most of the known world. So it was particularly appropriate to connect that passage from the Torah to their current experience 500 years later. And that's why we see it in all the Gospels, in all four of them, the hailing of John the Baptist as he comes into the picture saying, a voice crying in the wilderness says, prepare ye the way of the Lord. And it remains iconic for us at this time of Advent as we await the coming of the Christ child. But for us in 1111, I want to think of it a different way in the 21st century. I want to explore this idea of how God comes into the world to save it in a very non-dualistic way. And I hope that makes more sense as I get into this. I think it will. Last week, Linda and I invited you to think about this first word of Advent, which I'm calling confidence. Now, I've taken the traditional words that have been a part of this, a part of the Advent season for generations, and probably for most of the history of the church: hope, peace, love, and joy. And we see it on all the Christmas cards. But I wanted to take those static words and bring about a more orthopraxic way, a more pragmatic way of thinking about this time. And so the four words that I chose are confidence, courage, curiosity, and connection for hope, peace, love, and joy. Last week it was confidence, and what we suggested is that what we are confident in is this reality that we may not see, and yet we understand we are all part of this ground of being, this sacred ground of being that Paul referred to as God, the one in whom we live and move and have our being. And you may want to call it God, you may want to call it spirit, maybe you call it force because you're a big Star Wars fan, but it is our shared ground of being, and we discussed that leaning into that trust empowers us to live more fully in all of our moments. But we don't do that without courage. All of these practices overlap and interrelate with one another. Courage, like hope, so they're all basically a path to joy. But I want to think about this word courage because, like hope, joy, love, peace, it's often a word that gets overused and it becomes almost static and meaningless. In fact, it almost becomes idolatrous in a way. It becomes sort of this high value, this high virtue, almost a patriotic, superhuman virtue for some. What was it that Robert Frost wrote a long time back when he said, "The saddest thing in life is that the best thing in it should be courage." And it's the one thing that the Cowardly Lion seemed to want the most.
Courage. What makes a king out of a slave? Courage. What makes the flag on the mast to wave? Courage. What makes the elephant charge his tusk in the misty mist or the dusky dusk? What makes the muskrat guard his musk? Courage. What makes the Sphinx the seventh wonder? Courage. What makes the dawn come up like thunder? Courage. What makes the Hottentot so hot? What puts the ape in apricot? What do they got that I ain't got? Courage. You could say that again.
Huh? Right, yeah. Who put the hot in Hottentot? Courage. What puts it there? Well, courage, we often think of it as bravery, right? That's what the lion is speaking about, but I think that's a mistake. The path to peace is the path of courage. The way that we prepare the way for the coming of the incarnate Christ is courage. So first, think about the root word, because I love the root word studies, right? And so if you look at the Proto-Indo-European, the earliest sort of root word for courage, it's the word kurd, K-E-R-D, which means to have heart. Well, that reminded me of what I've experienced much during this time of pandemic, this past 9 months and more. And as I've been visiting with some of you on the phone, in person, with socially distanced coffee visits, or online with Zooms, or just watching in the media, there seems to be a lot of discouragement. And this discouragement got me thinking about what's really happening there. If you look up the word discourage, it literally means to lose heart, to cause one to lose heart, to lose one's sense of connection, not simply with others, but with one's very self. It's like losing this connection with reality, with the ground of our being, perhaps, means to be discouraged. But I think it's significant because in a way, it's not simply because of what's happening, and we would expect that, job loss, economic challenges, the pandemic, the political divisiveness, but the reality is that there's something else going on, and I think it's because it's at the very heart of our neurobiology. So let's back up a second and think about something. I want you to take a little quiz. What makes you mad? I mean, what really makes you mad? Try this. Take just a minute to say this. To fill this in. It makes me so angry when. See how many you can come up with. You can do that while I'm talking. Now, if you're like a number of people, myself included, you didn't have to think too much, not too much trouble to fill in that blank. A lot of things make us mad. A lot of things anger us. And some of them are really big global issues that we've been facing and seeing more and more of, with Black Lives Matter, racial injustice, or poverty and inequity, or sexism, or most of the isms, environmental decline, COVID-19, or just this whole year of 2020. It makes sense to be angered by these global realities because anger can actually be a very powerful motivator for us to seek change and find ways to do good in the context of global bad. But there's also an aspect of anger which is insidiously automatic in our lives, almost moment to moment, and it overtaxes our emotional stability, stresses our physical reality, wears away at the very fabric of our soul. The little things that really tick us off. You know, like the guy who's driving so slowly in the left lane every time I'm making my commute back home. Or when I'm a little late and stuck at a red light because it seems like that red light has it in for me. Or perhaps when they're out of my favorite item or your favorite item at the grocery store. For us, it's the Skinny Cow caramel ice cream bars. You know, they're only 100 calories, 90 calories each. You can eat 5 of them at one time. But then there's the fact that I really hate. It's the fact that there are only 2 ways to plug in a jump drive, so why does it always take me 3 tries? Anger and frustration are insidious facts of life. It gets in the way of what we often think of as peace, though. And the problem is we're wired for it, right? All it takes is a trigger and we're off. And therein lies a conundrum. Oftentimes we get mad. What we get mad about isn't really the problem, but it's a symptom of something else going on with us. And it doesn't help that we've been trained for centuries and centuries to have this orientation, this kind of behavioral, emotional relationship with life. As scientists have long shown, we have a bias for negativity and short tempers. Something trips our anger, our anxiety response, and our body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. It's like we're ready to either face the woolly mammoth or run. But now, thousands of years later, the woolly mammoths are gone, but we're still banging people over the proverbial head or our own heads against the wall when there's really rarely a need to be so reactionary. Some of us are like hammers, right? And we see everything as a nail. Some of us are like the panic button, and we see everything as a crisis. Some of us are like the help button, and we see everything as needing us to come to the rescue. It's just that we have a lot of evolutionary history involved, not simply our family and social systems that we grew up with, but we see everything with binary, dualistic eyes, right? We see it as either or. We see it as bad or it's good. We see it as wrong or right. We see it as useful or it's useless. It's a crisis or it's not a crisis. It needs fixing or it doesn't need fixing. And here's the thing, the more we relate to the world this way, in our daily routines, our jobs, and our relationships, the more that anger and frustration become discouragement and depression. And as I said earlier, we lose touch with ourselves. How can we possibly lean into our reality, have confidence in our reality when we're beaten down? In fact, when we're beating down ourselves, well, that's where we enter with courage, open-heartedness. This idea of open-heartedness, if we place that in the context of our text this morning, this is how I look at the passage. It's not get out of the way, look out, here comes the king in all his power and might. I mean, Jesus didn't come into Jerusalem. Didn't he come in with a donkey instead of a chariot like the Roman emperor? Didn't he come in crying over this city for all of its misunderstanding? Wasn't Jesus born in a smelly, dung-ridden a stable? The way I see this passage is saying something different. Have courage. Open your eyes and your hearts to make way for the very source of life and love that lies within us all and at the heart of creation. In other words, open up to our doubts. Open up to your own frustration. Open up to your worry. Open up to the reality that there is more to this moment, this experience, than what we're seeing. There is more to this life than what we know. And that's when the real courage is needed, right? That's the real work of the peacemaker. As Jesus said in the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, happy are the peacemakers, oddly enough, because they will be called the children of God. Happy are those that meet suffering, meet all moments with courage, open-hearted. They see their lives as part of the larger story of life, and each experience, each character as a gift for learning and strengthening one's resolve to live fully in each moment. So how do we do that? How do we practice this open-heartedness? Well, just a couple of things. First, I think we have to practice, as I said, we have to practice this way of seeing the world in non-binary, non-dualistic ways. Clearly, if we're in for a doctor for a diagnosis, if we got a car problem, if we've got a relationship problem, clearly we want to work towards resolving that, to fixing things. But most of life and most of the way we see life doesn't require that kind of binary approach. In fact, it's harmful, as I've already been saying. So how do we get out of that? We have to practice seeing the world in non-binary terms. We have to practice it as yes and not either or, but yes and. You remember the story of the farmer's horse that ran off? I call it who knows. I'll tell it very quickly, but a farmer lost his horse, jumped out of the stables and ran off. Later on that day, townspeople came and heard about it. They said, "We're so sorry for you. You must feel very sad." But the farmer smiled back and he said, "Who knows? This may be good, this may be bad." A couple of days later, the horse returned. This time it brought back a stallion with it. And so they saw this beautiful black horse, and as the townspeople came around to congratulate him, they said, "Well, you must be very glad as only you could." But once again, the farmer smiled and said, "Who knows? This may be bad, this may be good." About 4 or 5 days later, the son was trying to train that stallion. When it bucked him off, it threw him, and he had a severe leg injury that's likely permanent. And so the townspeople heard about it. They came back. They were very sad. They were trying to console. The farmer said, "This is horrible. You must be very sad." And once again, the farmer said, "Who knows? This may be good. This may be bad." About a month later, when the governor began conscripting all of the young able-bodied men to go into service to fight a battle, the townspeople came out to the farmer angry this time because they knew his son could stay home because of his injury. And they said, "You must be very glad." But the farmer simply smiled and said, "Who knows? Maybe this is good. Maybe this is bad." It's an interesting ancient story with a timeless message, I suppose. This idea of who knows. But it's not simply a passive resignation. That's the thing. It's an active way of seeing things as non-binary. It's an intentional way. My uncle put it this way once when we'd go camping with him and looking for wildlife, and my brother and I would grow impatient, and my uncle would say, "There's nothing so hard to see as something you're looking at too hard." There's nothing so hard to see as something you're looking at too hard. I mean, that's not simply true. That seems to be just as true with our daily experiences as it was true when we were looking for deer in a thicket. more often than not, when we take a breath, step back, and look for a wider view, which is what he'd instruct us to do. Take a breath, step back, look for a wider view. Then we'd see a lot more than just the deer that we had missed in the first place. And that's really what this who knows invites. That's really what open-heartedness invites. Taking a breath, stepping back, looking for a wider view. Who knows? Second thing that you can do is practice kindness. Sharon Salzberg, who is a psychologist and a meditation instructor and author, she writes that when you practice kindness, neuroscientists have shown that it actually changes our brain chemistry. And kindness, which is rooted in the word kin or kinship, there's a connectedness to kindness that opens us even as it opens and comforts others. Martin Buber, the theologian, the Jewish theologian, had said that when we begin to see one another with this I-thou kind of kindness, where we see one another as sharing in the sacredness, in this presence of the Imago Dei that we all have, when we see them that way instead of utilitarian, some purpose for us, some manipulation, some way of satisfying something we think should happen, when we see them instead of as I-it, but more as I-thou, we are practicing this kind of kindness that already acts as if there is this open-heartedness present. And it begins to change the binary way of seeing things. We do good, she says, because it frees the heart. It opens up us to a wellspring of happiness. It's not a perfunctory or trivial action. It's the deepest recognition that we're all in this together. Who I quoted earlier, Rick Hansen, the psychologist, said, in addition to what he said earlier about our negativity bias, he said in relationships, it can take typically about 5 positive interactions to overcome the effects of a single negative one. But don't be discouraged because, as I've said, here's the cool thing. Our brains are flexible. And the more we practice this kind of kindness, and the more we practice this kind of non-binary way of seeing things, the possibility that people are more than what we think we see about them, or that moments are more than what we think we're experiencing. It begins to change our brain and our emotions, and we begin to participate in this path of becoming peacemakers. So in conclusion, this Advent season, we're reminded once again, as 2,000 years ago, we're living in days of disarray, of pandemonium, and now with pandemic. We're divided, we're disparate, we're desperate. And as if that isn't bad enough, some of our jobs are not going well. Life at home can be stressful. It's pretty lonely right now for some of us. And there are those damn jump drives. But wait, there's really so much more, right? So much more than meets the eye. Something is coming. Something has come. Something is birthed at the very ground of our being, always present in the changing seasons and as close as our breath. Something at the heart of our stillness and calm that reminds us we are grounded in this shared love, rooted in this shared Imago Dei, God with us, the Christ of God incarnate in the world. And we are its salt and light and bridge builders. We all share in this, but it takes courage to see it. Take a breath, step back, look for a wider view. Open your hearts. Who knows?
Break out the gift. It is the season. Stop making sense. Put out those fires and always brace yourself. Give me the strength to hold together. Shine down on me. And I only have the man I want to be. This is Christmas, and this is home. Peace on earth's been alone.